Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I thought this is so interesting how, we start off with introducing our bad of the episode, and it's the Sandman creature. And I thought at first it was just going to be a Nancy thing, but I do like that as we escalate throughout the episode, we see that other people are seeing it. The kids from the youth center are seeing it, and then, Ace is seeing it, and then it's spreading like wildfire, like a virus. And I think it's so interesting because I don't think because the Sandman in this episode, very Freddy Krueger-esque of I kill you in your dreams and I can, except it works a little differently because Freddy could just straight up he kills you in your dream. Like if he slashes your throat, you're gonna die from a slashed throat in real life. But this thing, it's at first it gets to Freddy Krueger levels later, but in the beginning, it basically makes you sleepwalk into danger. Whether it's, or just like Nancy sleepwalking into Jake's cafe throwing a bottle, or Ace, walking out in the middle of the street. It's your dream doesn't have to correlate. It's just your body's an autopilot, because later on, George, and Nick are having their respective dreams, and they're both about to electrocute themselves in the tub. So it's not a 1-for-1. So you would think the nightmare would correlate to what you're doing in real life, but it's two separate things, which I think is kind of interesting. But like I said, later on it gets to the point that it gets so powerful that this thing, Ace gets cut on his arm, and then all of a sudden a cut just magically appears on his arm. So once again, very Freddy Krueger-esque. But I don't think, and to be fair, I've not seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie in years. I want to say the last one I watched was years ago when I watched the reboot in 2009. I want to say, because I think the the Friday the 13th reboot and that one came out, or remakes or reboots came out at the same time. Tangents and all that aside. But I don't think Freddy worked like that. He kind of played to whoever he wanted to. It was mainly teenagers, because he didn't really bother with adults or kids. He kind of bothered with teenagers. At least in my recollection. He probably got some adults too. I just don't. I remember it mainly being teenagers he was plaguing, but maybe that's early stuff. But the fact is that this thing the stronger it gets, the more powerful it gets. So it gets to the point it goes from kids to teens to adults, which I thought was such an interesting progression of that's just because I guess because children's dreams are easier to hijack, and then I guess because the older you get, the stronger your mind is. So it's to get through that defense barrier of what your mind is, it has to get stronger and stronger. But everyone's doing everything they can to stay awake. It's interesting, the different nightmares. For example, Nancy had Ace come over, and I was ooh, sexy times, when he was just I'm not afraid anymore. She's what, afraid of dying? And he's no, this. And he starts kissing on her neck, and she's just oh, clothes start coming off, but then his chest gets frozen. So it's her subconscious it's manifesting it, because it's kind of the things that she hasn't been paying attention to as much, even though it's right, the case as well as Ace. You have George dreaming about her dad, because her dad is trying to reach out to her. Which, side note, her dad, I'm going to butcher the actor's name, but the thing I'm best known for is he played Kevin in Supernatural. He also, because he exists in the, he plays a character named Ryan in the Arrowverse. He was, I believe his name was Ryan. He's the paragon of humanity in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and he's going to make a reappearance soon. I'll leave it at that. But he's playing her dad, which I'm I have to look at how old that actor is, because I'm dude looks like he's maybe 30. It's because I know the actress, Miss Lewis, is her name Leah Lewis? I'm blanking on the actress who played George. I know her last name, is Lewis, isn't it? I'm blanking. I'm terrible at this. I'm always terrible with names. But she's what? She's maybe early 20s. I'd assume everyone roughly is they're about teenagers to early 20s. Kind of like the Riverdale cast. So or at least kind of the beginning where the Riverdale cast is. But I'm assuming she's in her early 20s. So I'm he's got to be what? He had to have her when he was a teenager himself, which is a possibility. But I'm not unless that actor's older than I think he is. But I'm you look you don't even look 30, bro. You look like you're 20. He looks super young. So it's it looks like you guys could look like you're about the same age. It's It's crazy. That's why I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, are you going to play her brother? So I was like, no, you're her. What? That's what I'm saying. Maybe that actor's older than I think he is. Because I know, like, Jensen and Jarrett are, like, you know, from Supernatural are, like, in their 40s, I believe. I just kind of forget that, how old they are sometimes. I don't think they look their age. But maybe that the same thing kind of applies to him, where, like, maybe he's actually closer in age to them than I kind of give him credit. Like, for all I know, he might be in his 40s or maybe just, like, his mid to late 30s. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. But he's the one, like, that's what, I went on that huge tangent, but it's because George doesn't, you know, her dad hasn't been in her life for 17 years. It is interesting, too, because, like, the conversation doesn't come up too much, but I love that she was like, what's this weird thing of, like, my dad sending me a friend request? It's like, how would he even know about the wedding? It's like, right, because of the fan site, the fan site, Ted's been posting updates even about the proposal. She's like, oh, it's nothing sacred. It's nothing kind of a sacred secret anymore. Because she was also saying, like, what? It's like, my other siblings' dad's going to come out the woodwork? They don't really talk about that to me. I guess, I don't know. I guess I just assumed I don't know if that came up in season 1 or not, but I guess I just assumed they all had the same dad. It's like, oh, they, like, have, like, I don't know if any of them, like, the way she was talking, it didn't sound like any of them share the same dad. They might, like, all have, like, 4 different dads, or maybe at least, I don't know, like, who of her siblings have the same dad as her, like, who, maybe some of the siblings do have some dads, maybe there's some, like, 2 of them might have the same dad. Like, I think she was saying multiple dads, so it's like, I think she was saying, like, Ted's dad or Jesse's dad, so part of me was like, does Charlie have the same dad as one of them or something like that? I don't know, I just thought that was so interesting. Like I said, it was just an assumption on my part that, like, they all had the same dad. I just never thought about it, because the only parent we've really focused on is their mom. So, but you had Nick, because he's setting up the youth center. This was like the opening day and everything. He's having nightmares about, like, not being there for the kids, like they're in danger and they need his help. It's kind of what that comes down to. Ace is stuff connected to Mr. Bobbsey that is like, yeah, that he's mixed up in his crimes, which. Early on, George finds his box, and she's like, oh, like, can I get some candy? He's like, no, it's melted. I could get you some granola bars. She's like, ugh, gross. I was like, was it to the melted candy or the fact that he was offering you a granola bar, trying to get you a granola bar? But it's like, right. I guess he just never got rid of it, but it's like, because I guess he didn't know it was in a car. But yeah, like, it was been a little while since he kicked Mr. Bobbsey out of his car, so it's like, which once again, like, what is it, like, I guess, like, he hasn't been able to, get in touch with his girlfriend or her brother, and that one, and he's not on the best terms with Gil in the first place. But like Amanda, like, we haven't heard anything since the season premiere, like about, like, you know, her being off. But like, he was hoping that she would get in contact with him when he was like, yeah, I've been seeing your dad. But it's like, we still haven't gotten any conversations on that front. But we'll have to wait and see. So. Obviously, all this is happening, trying to deal with this nightmare situation, and it turns out Bess is the MVP of it. I mean, granted, she kept trying to have to prove herself because she, you know, it's like, you know, Nancy was me like, all right, we got to get in touch with Hannah about this, which it's like, no, I've been handling Hannah's stuff right now, so like, I know what I'm talking about. Let me go look into it. And there was this whole ritual about the Sandman that this all started, like the festival that got ruined with the first murder in that corn maze. Like, it disrupted a ritual that is basically about collecting sand every year. And I love that George was like, oh, you think that's weird? Wait till next month's thing. And Nick was like, what happens next month? And everyone's like, you'll see. Kind of just like horseshoe based, like weird rituals. But this one dates back to, like, what was it, like 22 people or whatever had, like, walked away into danger, and because of that, this particular festival was created. So I guess every year, this collecting of the sand kept the Sandman at bay, but now that ritual is broken. So it's like, it is interesting, like, it can't be an accident that this is, once again, all happening after Temperance comes to town, but also it's like, the Frozen Hearts killer situation disrupted something that led to, like, a supernatural thing that's usually kept at bay with the normal ritual. Like, it kind of jump started all of this by knocking everything out of sequence. So it kind of seemed like that had to have been done on purpose. We'll have to, another thing we'll have to wait and see. But Bess got frustrated because no one was listening to her, because she tried to tell Nancy that the whole plan wasn't going to work because it has to be done on, like, a full moon. It's like, so what are we supposed to do? Wait till the next full moon? No, let's do this now. And she brings up the fact is that she's been with Temperance because they're like, oh, you can't really trust. She's like, yeah, but I'm going to be a woman in white. And they kind of laughed at like, oh, yeah, and I'm going to be. And George is like, oh, then I'll be a pilgrim, ha ha ha. And she just felt like they don't listen to her. They don't respect her, what she contributes to the group. It's like, right, I know what I'm talking about, but you guys ignore me. And then obviously they put themselves in danger to the point that they each almost die in their respective dreams. And then I love that Bess recruits Ryan's help, and I love that it's kind of like, it's like, oh, why this whole thing happened. It's like, oh, I forget, it was a reference to Piper Beach or whatever, and Ryan's like, oh, that's why, oh, that's so awesome, that's so cool that's how it got its name, and Bess is like, I know, right, and they high five. I was like, oh, they're definitely going to be, they could be, I think they're on that same wavelength, like, energy-wise, like, I could definitely see, like, Bess and Ryan vibing like that, but I love that. But it's kind of like, yeah, you did it, Bess, because she's the one that got everyone together. She went into her dream, and ended up saving everyone, got everyone on like a magical bus, and they're like, so how is she doing all this? And it's like, you guys are very terrible at whispering. I would actually tell you guys that, but I'm a nice person. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And I love that she's not paying attention. Like, oh, could you pay attention? She's like, don't interrupt me. Don't touch my will. It's like, the fact of the matter is, show me some respect. I know what I'm doing in this situation. It's like, okay. And it's like, right, buckle your seatbelt. It's like, well, there's no seatbelts. There are now. It's like, okay. I was almost thinking like Bess, but it's like, right, she's in complete control of his dream, and even to the point she's not even paying attention, and the bus keeps going, and then she pulls out a fan to kind of fan herself to be like, no, I got this all figured out. I guess maybe there's a little sprinkle. The one I always think of with like kind of like how wild like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies got was like the Dream Warriors one, because I think that's the one with like, I mean, they eventually fight back in all of them, but I think Dream Warriors is the one where they really went buck wild, and like the kids and the people being played by Freddy like really fought back. I think that's what kind of reminded me of when like Bess is kind of in control, even to the point like, yeah, it's like I'm controlling his dream. And when she was pulling the women in white apart, it's like that one's like their hands got stuck together and like start ripping off the other one's flesh. I was like, Jesus, that's so metal. That's brutal as hell. It feels like something you would see from a Nightmare on Elm Street, or even just like a horror movie of that, specific of that time frame, of just kind of like, you'd see someone's like face get ripped off like that, like texture and just look. It's like, that definitely feels like something you'd see straight out of a horror movie. Like, I mean, you can see it in a more modern, but like that particular look and feel to it, it feels like a like Friday the 13th type of kill, or like a Nightmare on Elm Street type of kill. It reminded me of that. But Bess focuses, and she gets the lightning to strike, because the point is to destroy the Sandman in both the dream and reality. And so in that moment, using the crowbar in real life at that exact spot, using that as kind of a focal point to strike, to kill it in both worlds. I guess like using that, because the lane between reality and dream world was thinning a lot. And but luckily Bess ended up saving the day, and it's like, right, just kind of show me respect. I am going to be like, bring forth like, a modern woman in white. I still agree with the team of like, you shouldn't trust Temperance, because she is going, once again, Nancy isn't wrong about, they do like, should give you more respect. It's like, right, we are friends, so we should, give you more respect, but, and have your back, and not be so quick to like dismiss you, because she's like, yes, like, because it's understandable why, like, it's like, oh, Nancy is kind of the head honcho of this thing, because she kind of was the heart of this group, but also it's like, she is like the full-blown teen detective, so it's like, of course, it's like everyone, and she's had the earliest experience with the supernatural, but Bess is the one that is the most in tune with this magic stuff. So, I mean, they kind of all had their own experience, but Bess is kind of finding her own way through this as she, progresses to become a woman in white, because that was what her nightmare was about, like, trying to become one and being, like, despite everything, despite her attempts, kind of being ostracized and not welcome amongst their ranks. But, I just feel like she still, like, once again, she should be wary of Temperance, because it's like, everything's just, because she's still, once again, trying to fill that void in her heart with the whole Odette situation. So I think it's just simply, she has to be careful, and I think that is going to come back to bite her, but we'll see. Other interesting things kind of tying into this episode, Well, we do see that at the end of the episode, George does go to visit her dad. She's like, right, I want to talk about that friend request. So it's like, right, you had nothing to do with her 17 years. Like, why now? Like, maybe it's just a thing of like, he probably left and he's just like, right, I just never felt the right time to try and come back. And, or maybe like Victoria, her mom, had something to do with him staying away. Maybe, maybe not. Like, I'm not trying to cut him any slack, but, you know, maybe we'll find out he had his reasonings. It might not be good reasons, but he might have reasons that he believes, not necessarily justifies it, but he'll, you know, George will get some explanation of like, why you were out of my life and now why you're just picking now. Like, when we're approaching what is supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, especially because in her nightmare, it's like, right, I didn't want you. You think Nick would want you under different circumstances? He's only marrying you because he knows that you're dying. It's like, ugh. Because I'm sure, like, on some level, that's part of, like, obviously your subconscious is bringing a lot of your things that are on your mind and your own fears and using them against you, just like everyone. But I'm sure, like, her own insecurities and worries are, like, manifesting like that. Like I said, just like everyone else's. But there was this setup with Ryan I thought was kind of interesting. Well, first, the chores and everything, and the moment he found out that Carson was having dinner with Gene, and as he was leaving, he kind of gave him almost like that celebratory as he was leaving. But he was hanging around the kids, and he actually got them to open up a little bit about like the Sandman situation. But because he was also like hanging out with them, like, oh, these cookies, like he's like, oh man, cookies, these look solid, you know. And one of the kids had said like, oh yeah, these cookies, they're solid. Like you could tell like what they were setting up. But Nick was like, yeah, like if like the kids actually like you because you can understand them on a level like no one else can, like in the sense of knowing what it's like to grow up in a non-stable family situation. So, and I think they're setting up Ryan finding his place of like being there for kids who are maybe like not necessarily lost their way, but come from complicated family situations, like that he's going potentially working at the youth center, which I think is going to be a good thing for him to kind of, you know, give back in that way, especially considering the legacy that his family has, but also it gives him kind of a purpose too, because I think in a way, because obviously he was initially like, oh, I get it, you know, I'll celebrate what Nick's doing, but also come hang out with my daughter, you know, outside of the house, because they don't really spend as much time together outside of the house if it's not case related. But also it's just like, I think this will better him when it comes to like, you know, entering like, you know, probably understanding Nancy a little bit more, like when it comes to everything father related, then maybe like this will, you know, this new opening and position might help him progress in that regard. So there's that. Nancy immediately figured her, like the moment like her dad like tried to play it off like, oh no, like, oh yeah, I made this particular dish, and she ends up referencing it later of like, oh, you're missing your very like signature garlic element to it. And he's like, oh, you know. And it's like, he's like, oh, garlic's not good for like work lunches or whatever. And she's like, yeah, with your date with the DA Jean. And he was like, she's like, yeah, like I could smell her perfume. And it's like, yeah, you don't have to hide anything from me. I mean, it's not like you can, because I'll figure it out pretty. It's like, yeah, that's a problem having a detective of a daughter. She's going to figure that stuff out. She figured it out pretty early on because she was shooting him looks like, I know you're up to something. So, especially when Ramon's like, yeah, we need to, you know, hang out here, you know, at least until 2 p.m. And she was like, that's very specific. But it's like, yeah, you want to date? That's fine. You know, just once again, just kind of be more open about everything. It's kind of like their agreement. So, but things between him and Jean are hitting it off. They are hitting it off. It's like he's helping her with the case and everything. It's like little by little, they're taking steps. Because obviously there's more conversations about the Mr. Bobbsey situation where like there's the whole like the middleman, which we know. They don't know, but we still know it's Ace because he was the one that was delivering the boxes. And there was a witness who kind of went AWOL. And the moment you're like, right, he hadn't been in contact with him. Like, is that the dude that Bobbsey showed up with the bloody fist from? I'm like, that guy, because usually it's like you can't get in contact with someone who's a star witness like that. It's most like they're dead type of situation. They're sleeping with the fishes because apparently like, he went into one place and just apparently never came out a couple days ago. So we do see at the end though that Ace is helping them like look through some footage and stuff like that and clean it up. And the moment he's like, wait, some night ago at this particular place, it's like, yep. And he's like, that's not look good. And then it's him and Mr. Bobbsey, a clear picture of him and Mr. Bobbsey, and he turns to Carson. He's like, I can explain. So he's neck deep in all this. He might be like he's been an accomplice, but he might also serve as a witness that could be used against Mr. Bobbsey, which Mr. Bobbsey, because it's a complicated thing because he has been an unwitting accomplice, but maybe they could lessen his situation by having him like act as kind of like the replacement witness. But he's also like, it also depends on like the severity of the crimes, like what happened to their witness that Mr. Bobbsey most likely killed or, you know, beat to a pulp, and, you know, because he walked away, his hand's bloody. So he also made it clear that, oh, Ace, you're going to be sorry for this. So he's definitely going to put Ace, probably make Ace potentially take the fall for it. Probably be like, oh, he knew exactly what I was up to the entire time, especially considering all those boxes Ace has unwillingly delivered. So things probably definitely aren't looking good in Ace's department. But talking to her dad, Nancy did figure out that there was definitely something that she was missing about these cases, especially when Trot last episode kept being like, I'm a part of something more, and her brain kept trying to tell her in her nightmares, so she just wasn't sure what it was. And then working with her dad, she figured out that something was different, because usually at most of these crime scenes there were van tracks, meaning like, right, this is where he in and out, he brings the body and then he dumps it off. But then it's like, right, there were no tracks at the maze. And also there was a conversation that the coroner Connor like pointed out of like the victim's situation was like, one was like the first victim, Matthew, was like a clean like freeze and rip out of his heart. But like the others have been kind of sloppy. There's been pieces of the heart left, and that's because Trot didn't do it perfectly. So implying that there were two different MOs, two different killers. And just when Nancy shows up to warn Jean, she's like, yeah, another body was found when Trot was being brought from Portland. And it turns out the victim is like out front of Jake's cafe. I was like, wait, is it going to be? And it's like, yep, it's Jake. I was like, wow, poor bastard. Got brought back this episode because we haven't seen him since last season. He pops up in this episode for complaints. He was kind of a douchebag last season. Kind of a douchebag here, but, it's like, still doesn't deserve that. It's like, yeah, they brought you back just to kill you. That sucks, but shows that there's another killer out there, so. But I doubt this is just something bigger he was talking about. I think it's connected. Like, once again, there are larger, this is all pieces to a puzzle. Like I said, the Frozen Heart killer, starting it off with, like, dumping that body in the maze, led to this whole Sandman situation spiraling out the way it did. So I think all of this is going to continue to have ripple effects that they're not quite sure how it's all playing out. But it is all definitely part of something bigger. Now, whether it's something that's outside of Temperance's, like, wheelhouse that she's just taking advantage of later on, or we'll see. Maybe she has no connection to it. Maybe she's not even taking advantage of it. I assume she is. There's just no way all of this is going to go down a week after you rip down the barrier around Horseshoe Bay. And, like, once again, she probably, like, basically had a beacon for all things crazy and supernatural and wild to find its way to Horseshoe Bay, or maybe it's just she particularly is drawing some stuff here. We'll have to wait to see as the season progresses to find out where all this ends up taking us going forward. I'm excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.